right. So quite I thought it was quite interesting that Longchenpa answered some questions that were being asked in here. So maybe there will be more answers to your questions in the next few passages. So again, these are the source verses of the precious treasury of the way of abiding. So, since the 8 developmental approaches do not avoid the pitfall of ordinary mind, the genuine and ultimate heart essence is not seen. And here, 8 developmental approaches is referring to the 8 yanas prior to Ati Yoga. Ati Yoga being the 9th final yana of the Nigma 9 yanas. Okay? So, what are the implications of that statement? Well, it's suggesting that yanas 1 through 8, which means everything from object-based meditation to application bodhicitta, outer tantra visualization practices, cultivation practices, um, even anu yoga, which is talung trokur, where you work with the energies of the body. Some may assume that working with the energies of the body is necessary for freedom. It's true that the body is your mind, so it can hold many knots, but there's nothing more powerful than awareness practice for clearing those karmic knots. So it says so in the Treasuries of Longchenpa that we're reading now, but it also says, my teachers told me that on retreat. They explained when I was in the Tsalung retreat, this takes so many lifetimes before you reach enlightenment if you only do Tsalung, that's the very intense kind of yoga where you're many, many different poses and cycles and things involved with that. So Hatha yoga, actually, most of the yoga that you see out there is warm-ups for Trokur, which is a lot more intense. And it has to do with generating inner heat and things like that. But then when you go to Ati Yoga, the 9th yana in the Nyingma tradition, then they tell you when they read the scriptures to you and do the transmissions that Buddhahood in one lifetime is possible with Ati Yoga. And of course, we have a lot of self-doubt regarding the 9th yana, but that's why, this group is kind of special and pioneering because we're actually going to try Buddhahood in one lifetime. All right, why not? That's what all these books are about. That's what the path itself is pointing towards. And if you have a strong connection with Dzogchen Ati Yoga, I don't see why not. So I encourage you all, by the way, to relax in meditation as we go through these. Maybe even look back at the one who's thinking, look back at the one who's sitting here, always kind of doing that self-inquiry. Where is the one that's uh, doing? So then you come to this spacious sort of place. It's really good to relate to the text from that place. Okay? Sort of your natural state, settle into the subtle mind a little bit. Okay, so the 8 yanas, they use ordinary mind That means conditioning, contriving, fabricating, doing. So that's what distinguishes Ati Yoga, okay? I know I elaborated a lot on that one sentence, but it's because that's a pretty significant point right there for those of you who are paying attention to this kind of stuff. So, Ati Yoga, basic space, transcending phenomenon, completely ineffable, is of the nature of space, moment by moment. There is no wavering from Dharmakaya, the natural place of rest. Throughout the vastness of original basic space, there is spontaneous presence and supremely blissful and natural rest. If you do not realize secret awareness, that which is ultimately meaningful in enlightened being, you will never be free by that which entails deliberate effort. Don't you know that anything composite is impermanent and subject to disintegration? See, that line's pretty potent right there because a lot of Dharma practitioners don't ask themselves that. When it comes down to enlightenment, how could we possibly go so long thinking we can create it? When everywhere, all over the scriptures, is always mentioned the unconditioned. So, how can you condition the unconditioned? One can actually notice that fallacy there, okay? How can the tight and intricate knot of ordinary body, speech, and mind touch upon the ultimate meaning of the indestructible heart essence? This being so, if you desire what is sublimely meaningful, the way of abiding, put aside all factors that, like so many childish games, fetter and exhaust you physically, verbally, and mentally. So here's another great point. A lot of us can get wore out by our spiritual practice. I see a lot of folks that feel inadequate. They feel like they haven't done enough. What's great about awareness practice is you don't need to really take a long retreat, and unless you're still preparing to get into it, maybe. But I think you all are ready if you just let yourself be kind of confused at first. Let things be a little bit unknown, maybe. You may not it may feel like, it's not sinking in, but that's kind of how it goes, it slowly sinks in. But, all these really, our spirituality can wear us out, just to put that bluntly. I'm sure you all can relate to that. So, also, the title of the Treasury is mentioned here, The Way of Abiding. So, our group being centered around meditation and liberation of the mind, this is kind of the primary root text of the group at this point because is the way of abiding is how do you meditate, right? In the ninth dhyana, the ultimate sort of advice on how to meditate. So really great here. The nature of ineffability, the expanse free of elaboration, is the nature of phenomenon, natural, great perfection. An expansiveness beyond imagination, in which nothing need be done. Behold the ultimate meaning of supreme, uncontrived evenness. Since this is beyond causality and deliberate effort, be decisive. Self-knowing awareness, involving no perception of outer object and inner subject, has no time or place and is beyond phenomenon that originate or cease. It is pure like space, and so entails no provisional spiritual approach. Since all thoughts of this as ultimately existent are mistaken, Avoid any pitfall or obscuration that comes from misconstruing phenomenon as having identity. So here you might notice that from the last text that we were reading from the Namki Norbo cycle of day and night, which was published in the early 80s, translated in the early 80s, they kept talking about the true existence of things. Well, you see why that was bugging me a little bit? Because one of the samayas, sometimes in a different context, is known as non-existence. But of course, if we want to, in my opinion, think of everything in its truest form, then we're not talking about existence or non-existence. It's beyond that. So this also says something that backs really why I use this book for our approach here, and why you may be thinking, well, why do you share Dzogchen so kind of openly? Well, and without people necessarily having done Nundro and things like that. Well, it says right here, it is pure like space and so entails no provisional spiritual approach. You don't have to have. In fact, I think less baggage the better at this point. And as long as practitioners of this group continue to benefit, then, well, it must be true that you can approach Dzogchen nakedly. Just Dzogchen, without the other yanas. And your other yanas are, most of you grew up with religion and have some meditation background, and you can still do outer tantra. You can still ring bells and, chant mantras. All this stuff is fine. But take the top-down approach now. You're dealing with the highest teachings, which are very accessible. Okay, so right there it equates actually self-knowing awareness with there's no outer object or inner subject. So since all thoughts of this as ultimately existent are mistaken, avoid any pitfall or obscuration that comes from misconstruing phenomenon as having identity. And so here's somebody asked yesterday, we were using the bird chirping. Well, you see how we're assigning a lot of identity there to to create those three spheres of conception. So there's the identity of I being created, the identity of hearing being created, and the identity of a bird and a bird chirping, right? So a lot of subdivision happening there. And once that starts to relax a little bit, there's a oneness, a evenness there, which I think we were relating to that experientially, which was cool. So, in the indivisible and wholly positive realm, be decisive in supreme and infinite emptiness. Stand firm in the nature of phenomenon, which is without transition or change. In the primordial realm of basic space that does not abide in any specific way, the superficial layers of view are cut through incisively, and the key point in its entirety is revealed to be ineffability. So we have superficial layers of view. We have existential kind of opinions, beliefs, ideas about this reality, and it's almost ingrained in us to formulate those. But here it says through ineffability, this I don't know mind. You can ponder things, but leave it at I don't know, if possible. Thus, with the key point of ineffability having been revealed, Our implication is that awareness, a state of imperturbable rest, not cultivated in meditation, can be discerned in the absence of acceptance or rejection of whatever arises. So it's saying awareness cannot be cultivated in meditation, and it can be discerned in the absence of acceptance or rejection of whatever arises. So just by letting be. The vast expanse is the integrated mandala of mind. Vajra basic space, the supremely blissful state of natural rest, is sublime meditative stability, spontaneously present without having to be cultivated. Spontaneously present without having to be cultivated. We seeing this? See how it's different from the other approaches? Remember, yanas 1 through 8 harness almost every type of Buddhism that you see out there. Almost every type of mindfulness class. Pure Land Buddhism is outer Tantra. A lot of Zen Buddhism can be found in the yanas. Actually, I think Shikantaza goes into ninth yana. And I think that the Theravadins have consciousness without surface, so they also visit ninth dhyana. But a lot of what they do, taking vows, precepts, application bodhicitta, so many things are really using the ordinary mind, previous yana stuff, and so it's not like we're saying, oh, that's bad or anything like that. We're just we have to kind of call it for what it is, you know. And the true enlightenment cannot be cultivated, even though, and this brings a lot of confusion in the Dharma world because people talk about cultivating until they meet with a path like Dzogchen, where it's like, no, don't cultivate anything. You see a big switch up there. And we're used to fixing problems as well, and it's like, no, maybe don't fix that. So here's a comment saying, I was never clear on why accepting, rejecting is said to mask the natural state. Why does it matter what the mind does? Well, in this context, let's see. It says the state of imperturbable rest not cultivated meditation can be discerned in the absence of acceptance or rejection. Well, because that's like basically you're distracting yourself into acceptance and rejection. So rather than letting it be in a kind of openness and a oneness, your mind is attaching to something. It's pulling towards something and hooking into something. And even in modern psychology, you can see with the selective attention experiment that when you're hooked into one thing, you're missing a lot of other stuff. Maybe we could also relate on a more surface level to the horse farmer, the story of the horse farmer. Have you heard that one? Maybe. Okay. Well, the story is that there was a horse farmer who lost some horses, and the neighbors that evening were saying, "Oh, that's so sad that you lost your horses." And he says, maybe." And then the next day, the horses come back with many, many wild horses. So now he has, 10, 15 wild horses. He got a bunch more. And so the neighbors are saying, "Oh, isn't that great? How you have all these horses now?" And again, he's like, "Oh." Then shortly after that, his son falls off one of the wild horses and breaks his leg. And then again, everybody's son saying, "Isn't this terrible? He broke his leg. He's useless," and all this stuff. And so then again, oh, maybe. And then the army comes around recruiting people, and they cannot recruit the son because of the broken leg. So on and on. You see why acceptance and rejection can actually confuse us? Maybe. I like that this all started with a maybe. We can also put this in terms of the yogi that lost his dogs. But in that story, it's always bad. The neighbors come and say, "Oh, you lost your dogs. That's bad." And the yogi says, "Yes, it is bad. They better come back." Then they come back, and it's still bad. Just kidding. But Sean, do we have an understanding here, or how's it looking? I guess the confusion is that natural state is never gone, even in confusion. So riddling confusion confuses me. Well, you're not wrong that there's accepting and rejecting in the sense that you're still functioning, you're still in the play of mind, right? So in that sense, you're right. I think you're maybe bringing it into a higher context there. uh, the Buddha gave talks. There were some things he said, "No, this is not cool." To other things he said, "Yeah, that's cool." So it's not like you check out completely from the play of mind. It's that the grasping is missing, and you're also relocating yourself. And rather than being in the roller coaster of accepting and rejecting, you're checking out of that, and you're in the very basis for all accepting and rejecting. And in that context, you're right. It's pointless. Yeah. Very good inquiries. Way to go. All right. So, always present, like the course of a great river, it is self evident if there's uncontrived equipoise. Uncontrived equipoise. So, how can equipoise be uncontrived? Well, if I'm clenching my fist, how can my fist be relaxed if I stop clenching my fist? There's nothing I have to do. It's effortless. I'm releasing effort. So when we do our silent sits, that's what we're doing. We're letting little fires of the mind go out. We're releasing. Very important, because that's the 180 that you do in meditation from the previous yanas and most approaches that are out there. They're asking you to cultivate a meditation. And if you've met with Dzogchen and somebody who knows how to present effortless abiding, then you're very lucky because you're getting to know a whole nother side of this. Where instead of you creating another fist, creating more, doing more, you're actually beginning to release into enlightenment. Hmm. Beautiful, right? I think so. So, why did I say all that? Because it talks about uncontrived equipoise. The more you release, what's left over is your natural state. Maybe if you want to think of it in terms of sound, it's a natural resonance. And we all know that. We've been in our natural state before. We know what it's like to feel naturally joyful, naturally relaxed, all that. Enlightenment will be familiar to you. Trademark. Well, really, you've seen the light before. Your whole life is based in the light. You go in and out of the light. You can recognize the light now. Okay. So the nature of phenomenon at rest, just as it is similar to space. Similar to space, not space. You guys, right? Talking about that uh earlier. Similar to space. It's a metaphor. So since there's no transition or change, there's no question of whether or not there is distraction. The immensity of sublime basic space, which does not form and then disintegrate, is not within the range of finite experience that can be characterized by words. Those immersed in genuine being, for whom naturally arising awareness wells forth as the expanse of sublime knowing, whose minds are not pedantic even though they have heard many teachings, and who have experienced what is indescribable and beyond imagination, decide that this is not a matter of anything being characterized or not. Since neither meditation nor anything on which to meditate can be found, there is no need to slay the foes of lethargy and agitation. Since the heart essence is ineffability, the timeless freedom of apparent phenomenon and mind, the expanse of evenness, the nature of phenomenon in which confusion settles out naturally, abides uninterruptedly in the realm of Dharmakaya. There is no division between things arising and being free. They converge in a single blissful expanse. In arising, they arise naturally, holding to their own place. In abiding, they abide naturally, holding to their own place. In being freed, they are freed naturally, holding to their own place. Everything is naturally free, arising from the expanse of the nature of phenomenon, and thus does not stray elsewhere, being simply the display of Dharmakaya. And so we can get a little bit more specific here. Dharmakaya can kind of equate to non existence. It's the actual space in which everything is held. So let's compare it to when we go to sleep and we have a dream. Well, that dream is happening within a space, but that space is kind of only bound by the dream itself, isn't it? Oh, Where, ponder this for a moment with me. Where is the dream located? It's in the space of your mind, right? So just like that, Dharmakaya doesn't really have a location, but it holds everything. And so I would say Dharmakaya is equated to the essence, emptiness. Whereas it says the display of Dharmakaya, but really Dharmakaya being the feminine, like a womb, is inseparable from masculine, forming an androgynous union, inseparable from the child, which is all the display. But there is no display without cognizance, the Sambhogakaya. There is no, and the display is called Nirmanakaya. Kaya meaning body, all right? And so there's essence, which is emptiness, nature, which is cognizance, wisdom, knowingness, and then there's nature, the display, which is sometimes known as responsiveness. It's a co-emergent response from the union of Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya. Just like the child is a co-emergent response of the union of male and female. Okay?